Tonight on 24, the U.S. president announced a renewed blockade of Iranian ports, declaring the United States will now act as the guardian of the vital Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump claimed that Mujtaba Khamenei has a 90% chance of being killed. This follows a wave of U.S. attacks on Iranian ports using suicide drone boats, which has triggered intense regional reactions. Consequently, the Islamic Republic launched retaliatory strikes today, targeting Kuwait, Jordan, Bahrain, and Oman, threatening to escalate the conflict further. Tonight, we explore exclusive new reports detailing the behind-the-scenes maneuvers of Mossad's plan to bring Ahmadinejad back to power in Iran. Investigations by Haaretz and the New York Times reveal he has been in secret contact with Israeli officials for 4 years. We also cover Britain's major policy shift against the military arm of the Islamic Republic, as the British government officially places the IRGC on its list of banned groups. From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad. Hello and good day to Iran International viewers. U.S. Central Command recently announced that it will resume the naval blockade of Iran starting at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. CENTCOM says U.S. forces will enforce the blockade against ships traveling to and from Iranian ports and coastal areas. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has said the Strait of Hormuz will remain open, with or without Iran. In a recent series of provocative posts on his Truth Social platform, the U.S. president announced a major shift in Middle Eastern foreign policy, declaring that the United States will now act as the primary guardian of the highly strategic Strait of Hormuz. To fund this military presence, Trump proposed that the U.S. receive a 20% tariff on the shipping costs of all passing cargo. Additionally, he claimed there is currently a 90% probability that Mojtaba Khamenei has been killed. Elaborating further, he asserted that the Islamic Republic of Iran has bullied the region for 47 years, but insisted this behavior will no longer be tolerated. We have the strongest military in the world. You saw what we did to Venezuela. Look right now at what we're doing to Iran. For 47 years, Iran was bullying everyone. But, well, they can't push anyone around anymore. My colleague Marzia Hosseini joins us from the U.S. Congress. Marzia, now CENTCOM, has also confirmed that in a little over 24 hours, the blockade of Iranian ports will start again. In an unprecedented way, tensions are suddenly escalating rapidly again.
Exactly. At first, they said the blockade would start today, meaning by the end of Monday. Then they realized that legally they must notify ships 24 hours in advance, so they scheduled it for tomorrow afternoon. Considering this blockade, which is officially a return to hostilities, and given that the U.S. attacked over 310 targets inside Iran last week, we are pretty much back to 25 days ago, before the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between the parties. Trump says this time the blockade's name is different. It is called the blockade of Iran. He says previous blockades were general, but this one targets only Islamic Republic ships. Other ships can travel, and the U.S. will protect them while taking a 20% fee for it. Since the Islamic Republic requested $2 million per ship, we will see which option proves more expensive. Trump says the U.S. will become the region's guardian, though his actual method of protection remains unclear. We know that over the past 3 months, Trump has previously conducted 2 military operations. The first, Operation Freedom, lasted under 48 hours due to disagreements between the U.S. and regional Arab countries. The second, unnamed, joint operation between the U.S. Navy and Air Force was more successful and lasted nearly 2 months. During this period, they escorted at least 800 ships, carrying 400 million barrels of oil out of the Strait of Hormuz. The Navy navigated for ships that disabled their radars, while the Air Force protected them from potential Islamic Republic attacks. Trump likely plans a similar operation starting tomorrow, as Strait of Hormuz traffic has reverted to pre-memorandum levels, with only 13 to 14 ships passing daily. This situation has seemingly prompted the U.S. to return to the blockade with determination. Additionally, Trump made ambiguous remarks about Mojtaba Khamenei, stating he is 90% gone. It remains unclear whether Trump meant Khamenei is physically failing or if there is only a slim chance he is still alive. He emphatically reiterated this critical point, detailing a grueling 11-hour negotiation session with representatives from the Islamic Republic. Throughout those exhausting hours of dialogue, the counterparties continuously reassured them, explicitly stating that the agreement was finalized and that every detail was completely settled. However, this apparent progress vanished almost instantly. The moment they stepped out of the conference room and concluded the negotiation, they placed a phone call to retract everything, declaring that the entire deal was off. According to him, this deceptive tactic is not an isolated incident, but a long-standing pattern of diplomatic behavior spanning over 47 years. He noted that they had personally subjected him to this frustrating cycle at least 10 times throughout his own career. Time and time again, they would engage in prolonged discussions, seemingly reach a mutual understanding, and then abruptly flip the negotiation table at the very last second. He firmly asserted that they are drawing a line in the sand, declaring that they will no longer allow the Islamic Republic to continue this unacceptable behavior.
Thank you, my colleague Marzia Hosseini from the U.S. Congress in Washington. Meanwhile, CENTCOM has announced the end of a fresh wave of attacks on dozens of military targets in Iran, stating that the U.S. military used suicide drone boats for the first time in this operation. According to these reports, positions in Hormuzgan, Bushehr, Khuzestan, Sistan, and Baluchistan provinces, as well as around Handab County, the site of Iran's heavy water reactor in Markazi province, were targeted. Joining us is Farzin Nadimi, Fellow for Defense and Security at the Washington Institute. Mr. Nadimi, do you see any meaningful change in these recent CENTCOM attacks compared to previous clashes?
This strategic shift does not represent a sudden change in policy, but rather a transition to a far more systematic and methodical military campaign. United States Central Command, CENTCOM, has initiated a highly coordinated offensive targeting Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) Navy bases, as well as regular Iranian Navy installations, sweeping methodically from east to west across the region. To execute these precise strikes, coalition forces are deploying a diverse array of tactical assets, advanced airborne weapons launched from strategic aircraft, land-based HIMARS, high-mobility artillery rocket systems, precision missiles, and, as recently observed, cutting-edge unmanned surface vessels. These assets are directly striking critical maritime infrastructure, including port facilities, repair shops, and naval shipyards, where Iran's tactical Ghadir-class midget submarines are highly vulnerable in dry docks, effectively neutralizing these underwater threats before they can deploy. Simultaneously, CENTCOM has neutralized active IRGC ballistic missile launch sites located in northern and western Iran, the very installations responsible for directing hostile launches toward Jordan and vital U.S. military outposts. Additionally, heavy suppression strikes are decimating Iranian air defense networks. This systematic neutralization of radar and surface-to-air missile systems serves a dual purpose, securing immediate defensive protection for Allied forces and preparing the battle space for potential more extensive airstrikes deeper inside Iranian territory. And from this perspective, it seems they are doing this with a bit more time, with more leisure. Of course, on the other hand, it seems that the IRGC is also carrying out missile and drone attacks on U.S. bases in the region a bit more systematically, and satellite images show that some damage has been caused to U.S. bases in the region. So we can expect that both sides are continuing these actions very seriously. And in the Strait of Hormuz, Iranian speedboats are also being attacked regularly. Some of these attacks are not reported. Explosions are regularly heard in the Strait of Hormuz area, and we can expect that with the reestablishment of the naval blockade, the IRGC will also try to attack the U.S. fleet with more missiles, try to attack merchant ships more, in greater numbers, and more noticeably than in the past, in order to challenge the U.S. naval blockade. In terms of oil facilities, when, well, Iran cannot export its own oil, consequently, we are quickly returning to the historic geopolitical status quo, where Iranian officials repeatedly declare that if Iran's oil exports are completely choked off, no other country in the Persian Gulf will be allowed to export its crude resources either. Under these conditions, we can fully expect that commercial shipping tankers and vital oil terminals belonging to neighboring regional nations will become prime targets for Iranian maritime strikes. Furthermore, we will likely witness Iran deploying unmanned explosive vessels to disrupt shipping lanes in retaliation for U.S. military actions. Iran possesses a well-documented history of using such asymmetric naval tactics and can easily deploy remote-controlled explosive boats that remain intact and stockpiled in its domestic naval warehouses, despite being subjected to intensive past American aerial bombardment campaigns.
Mr. Trump says that the Islamic Republic has been bullying the region for 47 years, but can no longer do so. But that doesn't seem very realistic, does it? Because at this very moment we are speaking, the Islamic Republic's bullying, as Mr. Trump calls it, still continues.
Yes, the geopolitical bullying in these vital shipping lanes continues unabated and will likely persist. We must now see to what extent Allied forces can successfully stop them. Addressing this threat requires a highly detailed, comprehensive military operation that integrates air, naval, and land elements to permanently destroy hostile bases on the islands. Limited sporadic bombings on a temporary basis will only produce temporary effects. It is true that all IRGC Navy bases in the region, along with their key logistics hubs and supply depots stretching all the way to Bay Bahan, have already faced heavy bombings. Naturally, while these strikes are not without effect, a much larger campaign is needed. It can, but in the long run, it might affect a number of missile launches, but it seems that it will still have this capability to exert power in the Strait of Hormuz. And if the US really wants to do something serious in this regard, it would have to execute a very extensive military operation, possibly even in cooperation with regional countries, which I doubt it would be willing to do at this stage. Consequently, we might soon head in a dangerous direction where geopolitical tensions escalate so dramatically that Mr. Trump is left with no other choice but to intervene. Given the discussions about the United States being recognized as the primary protector of the volatile Strait of Hormuz region, coupled with their demand to receive a staggering 20% of the total value of the transiting ship's cargo, Washington must naturally accept a far greater military and security commitment in this critical maritime corridor. Of course, it is a very strange thing. Just as Iran's actions are illegal, imposing tolls on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz is illegal for any other country as well. And I don't know to what extent it was purely rhetoric, or to what extent he really wants to implement it, because it's not such an easy task. For a supertanker, 20% of its cargo value would be between $40 to $50 million. For a large container ship, just that 20% of the cargo value of that ship would be about $150 to $200 million. And collecting this is really a difficult task. The result is playing right into the hands of the Islamic regime's propaganda, just as we saw in Mr. Araghchi's recent tweet.
Thank you, Farzin Nadimi, Senior Fellow for Defense and Security Affairs at the Washington Institute, joining us from the same city. Mr. Nadimi referred to Abbas Araghchi's tweet, which he published about half an hour ago. I'll read it for you. In this very reaction to Donald Trump's remarks about receiving fees for securing the transit of commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz, the Islamic Republic's foreign minister said, "Donald Trump is absolutely right, and anyone who guarantees the safe passage of commercial ships should receive money in exchange for these services." He said that Iran has always been the guardian of the Strait of Hormuz and will remain so forever, that Trump's proposed figure of 20% is too high, and said the Islamic Republic will act more fairly. The Security Council meeting will be held in a few minutes regarding the developments in Yemen, shipping security in the Red Sea, and the role of the Islamic Republic and the Houthis in this country. Also, the flight of an Iranian plane to Sana'a, and the remarks of the commander of the IRGC Quds Force about expanding the axis of resistance from the Strait of Hormuz to Bab el-Mandab are among the topics to be reviewed by the Security Council members. Meanwhile, inside Yemen, the Ministry of Defense, which is backed by Saudi Arabia, said we bombed the runway of Sana'a airport to prevent an Islamic Republic plane from landing. According to this ministry, Tehran insisted on violating Yemen's airspace. In reaction to this attack, Yahya Saree, the Houthi military spokesperson, considered this action the end of the de-escalation phase with Saudi Arabia and threatened that they would respond to this attack. My colleague Mariam Rahmati joins us from the UN headquarters. Mariam, while the UN member states in the Security Council were particularly worried about the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, now with the rising tensions in Yemen, it seems that Bab al-Mandab will also probably be added to this crisis very soon.
And this very issue is the fear of the Security Council members, especially the 5 permanent members who have disagreements with each other and think that this situation and what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz and these tensions between the US and the United States and the Islamic Republic could make the situation in the region even more tense than it already is. As you said, the internationally recognized and Saudi-backed government in Yemen has announced that today, to prevent an Iranian plane from landing, they targeted the runway of Sana'a airport. And this news actually made a lot of noise here at the UN very quickly, and it will definitely change the atmosphere of the meeting. According to official statements from the internationally recognized government of Yemen, an Iranian Mahan Air passenger plane initially intended to land in the Houthi-controlled capital of Sana'a. However, following a sudden military attack on the airport's runway, the aircraft was forced to divert its land route, ultimately landing at the alternative port city of Hodeidah. Real-time aviation tracking data from flight radar confirms that this controversial flight is currently on its return journey back to Iran. Meanwhile, state-affiliated media outlets in Tehran have downplayed the incident, announcing that the trip was completed successfully and insisting that no immediate danger ever threatened the safety of these Mahan Air aircraft. The Yemeni Houthis, attributed this attack to Saudi Arabia and warned that they would respond, an issue that, as I said, has increased the concern of members of the international community and members of the Security Council regarding the breakdown of the de-escalation process in Yemen. And they think that, in fact, these tensions will now increase even further. Although the Houthi rebels asserted that his controversial flight was strictly humanitarian in nature, the internationally recognized Yemeni government strongly accused the Islamic Republic of Iran of exploiting the route to smuggle prohibited illicit materials. They alleged that Tehran utilized the flight to transfer dangerous weaponry and sanctioned cargo, directly violating several United Nations resolutions, which ultimately forced Yemeni forces to launch a targeted military strike against the airport. Furthermore, Houthi officials asserted that Saudi fighter jets actively intervened to prevent this plane from landing, prompting the group to declare that it will definitely attack Saudi airports and other vital domestic infrastructure. Crucially, this tense escalation occurred just a few hours before a highly anticipated UN Security Council meeting was set to begin. As a direct result of this incident, the ongoing conflict in the Red Sea and the influential role of the Islamic Republic of Iran have received significantly more international attention and scrutiny than ever before. Today, the Security Council members were supposed to vote on extending the UN Secretary General's mandate to submit monthly reports on Houthi attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea. It's not yet clear whether this resolution will be approved or not, but the concern of the Security Council members is that if the conflict between Israel, the US, and the Islamic Republic expands, which in the view of many diplomats has now become more. This critical juncture is when the Islamic Republic might strategically leverage its military capabilities in the Strait of Hormuz alongside the Houthis' destructive assets in the Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea. Such a coordinated escalation poses a severe threat, potentially plunging two of the world's most vital maritime trade routes into crisis simultaneously. Compounding these regional tensions, the Houthis have issued explicit warnings in recent weeks, threatening to immediately resume targeted attacks against any and all commercial shipping vessels linked to Israel. And also, officials of the Islamic Republic have said that if the war with the US and Israel expands, the axis of resistance can act in a coordinated manner from the Strait of Hormuz to Bab el-Mandeb. For this reason, many members of the Security Council are worried that the Houthis will once again become part of these broader conflicts and endanger the security of one of the world's most important shipping routes. In any case, the Security Council meeting is scheduled to be held in 13 minutes, and surely the positions of countries after the attacks that occurred today at Sana'a Airport and the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, as well as the Red Sea, will be very important, and focus and attention will once again be drawn to the role of the Islamic Republic in the Red Sea and the Houthis' use in endangering the security of the Middle East tomorrow.
Thank you, Mariam Rahmati, our correspondent from the UN headquarters there in New York. Mariam will be our eyes and ears in the coming minutes, and if they say anything important about Iran in this Security Council meeting, we will definitely hear from her. Along with the developments in Yemen, many countries in the region, in response to the Islamic Republic's attacks on Egypt, Qatar, and the UAE, have also condemned these repeated attacks by the Islamic Republic in separate statements. Ali Sadrizadeh, Middle East analyst, is with us from Frankfurt. Mr. Sadrizadeh, have we entered a phase of escalating tension beyond the Persian Gulf toward Bab el-Mandeb, or are these signals that the Islamic Republic is sending to the region and the world that if you escalate the conflict, I will make it trans-regional as well?
No, actually, geopolitical tension has risen to an alarmingly high level in Yemen. Just about half an hour ago, the Houthi rebels officially announced that the critical ceasefire established between themselves and the internationally recognized legitimate government of Yemen 4 years ago, mediated by the United Nations, no longer exists. Under the terms of this fragile truce, all hostile military actions and cross-border attacks, including those targeting Saudi Arabia, were supposed to halt entirely. Furthermore, this landmark agreement had envisioned that at least 2 civilian flights per week would operate from Sana'a airport to destinations in Jordan and Egypt. Unfortunately, all of these vital flights have now been abruptly cancelled, threatening to plunge the region back into active conflict. Conversely, the internationally recognized Yemeni government, which receives strong backing from Saudi Arabia, has accused the Houthi rebel faction of maintaining a biased aviation policy. Specifically, they claim the Houthis permit Iranian aircraft to utilize Sana'a airport, while blocking flights from regional partners like Jordan and Egypt. Highlighting this discrepancy, a Mahan air flight recently landed in Sana'a last Monday. This Iranian aircraft transported an official Houthi delegation directly to Tehran, allowing them to attend the highly publicized funeral of Khamenei in Iran. And now the Islamic Republic apparently wanted to transport these individuals back to Sana'a, again using Mahan airplanes. However, there was apparently more than just people on board. Suspicion arose that other things were hidden inside. Indeed, the internationally recognized legitimate government of Yemen has stated that this specific plane was carrying illicit goods and unauthorized cargo that absolutely should not have entered Yemeni territory, indicating a deeper, covert operation beyond a simple passenger transport. Indeed, as your reporter previously noted, the Saudi-backed South Yemeni government launched a targeted military strike directly against the runway at Sana'a International Airport. This strategic move successfully blocked a civilian Mahan air flight arriving from Iran from landing as scheduled, forcing the aircraft to immediately divert and touch down in Hodeidah instead. Consequently, in direct response to this aggressive provocation, Houthi rebel forces have officially declared their intention to resume targeted retaliatory airstrikes and drone attacks against key installations inside Saudi Arabia, further escalating the regional conflict. If tension escalates in the Strait of Hormuz, the Houthis will certainly take action where they can, but on the other hand, the South Yemeni government has also announced that with Saudi support, it will stop the Houthis' activities. However, the South Yemeni government is not capable of this. If tension escalates, Saudi Arabia will directly enter the war with a
To a large extent, it seemed that the Saudis were showing restraint during these recent conflicts. Now it seems that if they really carried out this attack in Sana'a, at Sana'a airport, well, that's a very dramatic move. Do you think the tolerance threshold of the region's Arab countries is coming to an end with these non-stop attacks that the Islamic Republic is carrying out against these countries? Could they really change their strategy? Because they seem to try very hard to manage this crisis somehow through conservative, diplomatic bargaining, but the Iranian side doesn't seem to want to follow the same doctrine.
That is absolutely correct. On Monday, Saudi Arabian authorities initially permitted a Mahan air flight, an airline closely linked to Iran, to land in Sana'a to transport a Houthi diplomatic delegation to Tehran for a high-profile funeral. The Saudi government wanted to ensure no diplomatic disruptions occurred during this sensitive memorial service. However, their stance shifted dramatically for the return flight, suspecting that the aircraft was transporting unauthorized cargo, advanced weaponry, or illicit personnel back to Yemen under the guise of diplomatic travel, and compounded by the rapidly escalating regional tensions in the meantime, the coalition decided to intervene and prevent that specific plane from landing in Sana'a. However, a major strategic obstacle remains. The critical port city of Hodeidah remains firmly under Houthi rebel control. Consequently, if the Islamic Republic of Iran intends to smuggle vital humanitarian goods, commercial merchandise, or advanced military weapon systems into the region, they can easily succeed. Ensuring these shipments directly reinforce the Houthis. This alarming strategic vulnerability explains why Saudi Arabia is actively preparing itself for further escalation. Furthermore, judging by the actual military capabilities of both the southern Yemeni government and the Houthi forces, I strongly believe these recent retaliatory attacks were orchestrated and executed by Saudi Arabia itself, contrary to the official claims made by the South Yemeni government regarding their own involvement. Consequently, this dangerous development serves as a stark indicator of the rapidly escalating geopolitical tension across the Middle East. The provocative, hostile actions taken by the Islamic Republic essentially constitute a direct act of war against all neighboring Persian Gulf nations. This alarming regional threat was further underscored just 2 hours ago when the Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, Iran's Central Military Command, officially declared that every Persian Gulf state is considered an active participant in the regime's escalating war with the United States, solely due to the strategic American military bases located within their borders. So we are entering a new situation, especially since Trump's approach to the Islamic Republic is also one of all-out war. If you consider what he has done in the last 24 hours, he has hit almost all of Iran's coastal bases in the south and is gradually taking away the capability to launch attacks from within the Islamic Republic. That's why Trump has gained a lot of courage, or rather a kind of boldness, saying that the Strait of Hormuz is under his control. And he even made this bizarre statement that ships have to pay 20
Thank you, Ali Sadrazadeh, Middle East analyst, with us from Frankfurt. The Houthi leader has also said in the past few minutes that they will target Saudi Arabia's vital infrastructure.
این یک خبر فوری است.
In connection with these same volatile regional developments, we have received significant breaking news. United States President Donald Trump has officially notified the U.S. Congress that military conflict with Iran has officially resumed. This critical notification practically confirms the fragile ceasefire has collapsed and active warfare has restarted. Consequently, this decisive action is poised to thrust the ongoing constitutional battle over the scope of the president's war powers into a highly contentious new phase. Lawmakers who have continuously sought to curb unilateral executive military actions are now forced to confront this sudden escalation directly, setting the stage for a major legislative showdown regarding foreign policy authority and security. Congress had previously requested that President Donald Trump either bring an end to the ongoing military conflict or seek formal congressional authorization to sustain it. However, the U.S. president firmly maintains that the authority to make this crucial foreign policy decision rests entirely with him alone. Highlighting this growing tension, the New York Times reported that it obtained Trump's official letter dated Friday, which was finally delivered to the newspaper on Monday. Britain has placed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on its prescribed counterterrorism list. Supporting the group is now a crime punishable by up to 14 years, effectively designating it a terrorist organization.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Indeed, even up to the present day, it is quite apparent that the United Kingdom has acted with a significant delay when compared to its European counterparts. To put this into a clearer perspective, let me provide some brief historical background. There was a period when several European parliaments acted independently. For instance, Sweden and the Netherlands took individual initiative to declare the IRGC a terrorist organization. Subsequently, in a much broader collective effort that directly coincided with and was heavily influenced by the powerful woman life freedom protest movement, the European Parliament, which represents the legislative assembly of all these EU member states, officially identified and designated them as a terrorist organization. Simultaneously, the British Parliament, demonstrating a rare and united cross-party coalition of both major political parties, voted to designate the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, as a terrorist organization. However, the executive British government has exhibited significant hesitation and prolonged deliberation regarding this crucial foreign policy decision. Even today, the government merely classifies the IRGC as an active threat to national security, rather than formally prescribing them under the Terrorism Act. As you correctly pointed out, only one small step remains to officially categorize them as a terrorist group. Ultimately, the British government harbors complex underlying diplomatic considerations that remain quite unclear and perplexing to me. But the most critical point to recognize is that once a foreign entity is officially designated as a hostile state threat, the entire apparatus of national security shifts. This triggers a dramatic escalation in defensive actions, intelligence. We have already seen numerous public reports from domestic security agencies boasting about uncovering sophisticated espionage plots, apprehending agents, and neutralizing immediate dangers, which most notably included taking the credible, severe threats directed at the independent news channel, Iran International, extremely seriously. Moving forward, it is highly evident that the British government intends to scale up these counter-operations significantly. This expansion of state defense will be particularly pronounced in targeting the clandestine financial and monetary monitoring networks operated covertly by the Islamic Republic of Iran, even deep within British waters. By reinforcing surveillance, auditing illicit cash flows, and dismantling front companies, British authorities will heavily fortify their measures to disrupt these hostile financial operations and protect domestic sovereignty from such hostile foreign interference.
What do you think its practical consequences on the ground in Britain will be?
Well, one of them is this issue of financial and monetary measures, which will heavily impact operations, because as we know, if you shut down the core revenue-generating network, it inevitably affects everything else down the line by cutting off vital funding. The second key point revolves around the fact that the European Union and many European countries have practically already taken this decisive step. However, since Britain has now finalized Brexit, it no longer makes its policy decisions under the jurisdiction of the European Parliament. Instead of following the collective directives and decisions explained by the European Parliament and the EU as a whole, the UK must now independently coordinate its own sovereign regulatory measures. With the decisive actions taken earlier today, and likely that final crucial step you mentioned, a strong connection is practically established now. Although this development is not part of the Brexit process, it has practically taken the same regulatory step and made the same strategic decision that most other European countries have already made. Consequently, it successfully enters that broader continental network, paving the way for seamless integration and enhanced future cooperation. Because it enters that network, it can therefore carry out much more precise coordination. It can carry out much more extensive coordination, which it didn't really have much access to as a member outside the European Union. I don't want to say it doesn't have it at all, but this connection, this coordination is not established right now. With such a decision, it is paving the way to enter the integrated decision-making of the group of European countries.
Thank you, Hossein Alizadeh, international affairs analyst from London. The Haaretz newspaper wrote in an investigative report that Mossad, as part of the project for regime change in Iran, had considered Mahmoud Ahmadinejad as the option for Iran's leadership after the Islamic Republic. According to this report, Mossad's contact with Ahmadinejad had started about a year before the October 7th attack. At the same time, the New York Times also wrote in an exclusive report that Israel had a secret plan to turn Ahmadinejad into an intelligence asset, and climate change conferences in Hungary and Guatemala were covers for his secret meetings with Mossad officials. Jamshid Barzagar, journalist and political analyst, joins us from Toronto. Mr. Barzagar, you surely remember that the New York Times had a detailed report on this before as well. Now that Haaretz has also been added, and the New York Times has given more details, it seems a bit more believable with the details they have provided. How do you see it? That really a figure like Ahmadinejad, who denied the Holocaust and had such anti-Semitic approaches, could have been favored by the Israelis?
Hello to you, Mr. Farahzad, and to all your respected viewers. Yes, you are absolutely right. The New York Times had previously published a very similar and shocking report, which actually met with great surprise and widespread astonishment at the time of its release. It is truly difficult to comprehend how someone with the controversial past, background, and radical thoughts of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, a figure who took perhaps the harshest possible positions against Israel among all heads of government in the Islamic Republic, openly denied the Holocaust, and whose aggressive rhetoric went far beyond being merely anti-Israel, becoming completely anti-Semitic, how such a person would actually cooperate with the Mossad intelligence agency. But unlike the New York Times report, which is mainly focused on the sensational relations and espionage operations involving Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and the Mossad, the Haaretz report offers a much bigger and more accurate picture. This broader perspective largely reveals the underlying motivation for publishing such an investigative piece in the first place, especially when you consider the progressive, critical political stance that the Haaretz newspaper historically maintains. Look, when you analyze it overall, the report is actually targeting and criticizing David Barnea, the former head of Mossad, alongside Benjamin Netanyahu, the long-serving Prime Minister of Israel. I mean, this report does not hold back. It openly points to very serious, deep-seated strategic differences and bitter disputes at the highest military and security levels, exposing a fractured Israeli leadership struggling to align on critical defense policies. Not just regarding Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, which the Israeli Security Cabinet finds out about very late, or actually senior military commanders find out about, but also in other cases mentioned in the report, like arming and training Kurdish forces or Kurdish parties, which of course has been repeatedly denied by the Kurdish parties. In the Haaretz report, it is shown with what level of disbelief these Mossad plans for regime change and overthrowing the Islamic Republic were actually referred to, part of which also goes back to Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. However, in both investigative reports, and most notably within the account published by the New York Times, this time far more precise details are provided regarding real individuals involved in these events. For instance, the reports specifically identify the university president who facilitated Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's invitations to Hungary and Guatemala. This granular level of detail makes it significantly more credible that several covert meetings actually took place between Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and various Mossad agents, including, in one notable instance, a direct face-to-face encounter with David Barnea, who served as the head of Mossad at the time. Consequently, numerous critical questions still remain unresolved. Specifically, this core enigma remains completely unanswered. Was the intelligence and security apparatus of the Islamic Republic genuinely oblivious to these sensitive contacts? Or, alternatively, did they strategically attempt to penetrate Mossad? They might have done this by deliberately cultivating Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's public image as a demagogue, populist, and highly power-hungry figure whose beliefs shifted after his presidency, using this sophisticated deception as a clever way to infiltrate and gather classified intelligence from their adversaries. This issue and this question become even more prominent, especially after the attack on Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's house, the killing of his bodyguards, and his escape, according to the New York Times report, in a black Peugeot and taking him to a Mossad safe house, because he later leaves this house, and of course, until last Monday, no picture of him had been seen, there was no news of him, but anyway, on Monday, this person was among the officials and those who, unlike, say, Hassan Rouhani or Mohammed Khatami, attended Ibrahim Raisi's funeral. Numerous questions continue to swirl regarding the complex relationship between former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and the Mossad. However, a detailed report by Haaretz underscores a more pressing reality: the strategic vision shared by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and David Barnea, their aggressive push for Iranian regime change, which they formally presented as a concrete plan to Washington and the White House, has profoundly shaped the current geopolitical landscape. This revelation is particularly critical now, as Israel prepares for upcoming national elections. With Barnea having recently departed from his position at Mossad, these developments could severely weaken Netanyahu's standing and compromise his electoral prospects more than ever before.
Well, this very point you mentioned, that he attended Raisi's funeral, raises a lot of questions. Really, if the intelligence services of the Islamic Republic had also reached the assessment that he cooperated with the Israelis, how, for example, did they allow him to participate in such a ceremony? According to the latest New York Times report, he is currently under a state resembling house arrest. If the Islamic Republic's intelligence apparatus definitively concludes that he actively cooperated with Mossad and personally met with its chief, David Barnea, then his fate is likely sealed. He should probably be considered a walking dead man now, as this is certainly not a betrayal that the regime would ever forgive easily.
Yes, look, there is no doubt about one thing. Israel has an incredibly deep influence at the highest security, intelligence, military, and political levels of the Islamic Republic. Various officials have said this, including Ali Younesi, if you remember, the former Minister of Intelligence of the Islamic Republic, who said that all leaders of the Islamic Republic should worry about their lives. During the 12-day war and the 40-day war, we also saw how accurate the intelligence was, which, among other things, led to the killing of Ibrahim Raisi, the president of the Islamic Republic, and many high-ranking military and political officials in his office. But as for whether Mahmoud Ahmadinejad really, or how much these reports can be relied upon, how much an intelligence agency like Mossad, even its former officials, would be willing to publish information of this level with this degree of sensitivity and expose one of their own assets is still open to doubt. In any case, one should always look at such reports with skepticism. It's crucial not to forget that former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's high-profile presence at Ibrahim Raisi's funeral occurred well after the initial groundbreaking report by the New York Times was published over a month ago. This timeline signifies that serious media reports and allegations regarding Ahmadinejad's secret cooperation and clandestine meetings with Mossad agents had already become widespread public knowledge. Despite the intense scrutiny and potential political fallout surrounding these shocking revelations, he nevertheless made the calculated decision to attend this prominent state ceremony alongside other Iranian officials. And this scenario could actually create a distinct possibility, as I previously mentioned, that this sensitive connection and these clandestine meetings could also have taken place with the direct coordination and full knowledge of the Islamic Republic itself. This is highly plausible because we witnessed that when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was supposed to take decisive political action, he practically refused to do so. Instead, he even somehow escaped from the secure safe house he had been taken to and voluntarily put himself right back at the complete disposal of the Islamic Republic's intelligence services. Whether he is under house arrest or whether this action is being taken to protect him, these are all unanswered questions that neither the New York Times report nor the Haaretz report answers. Although, as I mentioned, in the Haaretz report, the main issue is not Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. The main issue is the fantasies that this newspaper says Netanyahu and the former head of Mossad had, and the result of which was this very failure from this newspaper's perspective.
Thank you, Jamshid Barzagar, journalist and political analyst, with us from Toronto. I want to bring another piece of news to your attention. In the past few minutes, U.S. President Donald Trump posted on his social network, Truth Social, saying that tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, which is in about 30 hours, he will have an important address to the nation. He didn't say what the details are, but one can guess that it might be related to Iran. You were seeing live images while I was speaking from the UN Security Council meeting on developments in Yemen and the Red Sea. Let's listen to a part of this meeting together.
The people of Yemen are facing an overwhelming cascade of compounding crises, ranging from widespread, preventable diseases to a near-total collapse of basic services, acute food shortages, and pervasive physical insecurity. For several painful years, ordinary Yemenis have lived with the agonizing daily uncertainty of not knowing whether they will be able to feed their families and children from one day to the next. Traditional coping mechanisms and survival alternatives for this desperate situation have quite simply been completely exhausted. Consequently, food insecurity has reached truly catastrophic levels across the nation. Currently, more than 18 million vulnerable people throughout Yemen suffer from chronic hunger, with millions experiencing severe, life-threatening deprivation. This ongoing emergency has solidified Yemen's status as the world's worst food security crisis, leaving vast populations trapped at IP emergency levels. Today, millions of vulnerable children face severe malnutrition alongside pregnant and breastfeeding mothers who are desperately struggling to survive this compounding nutritional crisis. On the ground, tireless humanitarian aid workers find their resources to be extremely inadequate and painfully insufficient to meet the skyrocketing demand, even as the overall scale and depth of this emergency continue to grow exponentially every day. This critical lack of international funding is putting life-saving relief efforts at grave risk. In the last year alone, a staggering 450 vital medical clinics were forced to close their doors permanently due to a severe lack of operational resources, leaving remote communities completely stranded. Consequently, impoverished families are forced to make unimaginably difficult daily choices just to get by. Do they spend their meager coins to buy basic food or vital medicine? Do they send their young children to school to learn or send them to work in the fields to survive? Mr. Chairman, despite the massive operational challenges facing us, including active conflict and severe supply chain disruptions, our dedicated aid partners are working tirelessly to deliver essential relief. In particular, local NGOs on the ground in Yemen continue to operate under extremely difficult and hazardous conditions to reach those most in need.
This is breaking news. Well, we have breaking news again regarding tensions in the region. According to reports from Iran, The sound of 4 explosions has been heard in eastern Bandar Abbas, as well as Larak in Hormozgan province and Kunarak in Sistan and Baluchistan, according to IRNA. The nature of these explosions in Bandar Abbas has not yet been determined by officials, and it is unclear whether they were caused by the impact of what they call enemy projectiles or friendly air defense shooting down drones. Tasneem also reports the activation of Bandar Abbas's air defense, but over the past few days, you've seen that the United States has repeatedly targeted sites in Iran in response to the Islamic Republic's actions. Thank you for watching tonight's 24 program. You can watch the show again a bit later on YouTube.